My name is Rachel Whitman. I'm 52 years old, and 2 hours ago, my husband of 28 years stood up at our daughter's college graduation brunch and announced he was leaving me. He did it while holding a mimosa. A goddamn mimosa. We were at Magnolia and Oak, this upscale spot in Raleigh, the kind of place with $16 pancakes and pressed white napkins. Our daughter Jenna had just graduated summa cum laude from UNC Chapel Hill. Everyone we loved was there. 47 people, to be exact. I counted later. Friends, family, a few of Ethan's business buddies, some people I didn't even recognize but apparently had been instrumental in Jenna's journey. I saw it coming 5 seconds before he said it. Ethan's mouth twitched when the server poured his champagne. I know that twitch. It used to mean he was about to make an inappropriate joke or a last-minute pitch to an investor. Now it meant something worse. He stood up, tapped the glass, and everyone turned to look. My hand instinctively reached for Jenna's. She was smiling, radiant in that sky blue cap, expecting a speech that would end in proud tears. And instead, he said, "I've decided to start a new life." The silence that followed felt like gravity had doubled. I heard forks stop moving. Someone actually gasped, which I thought only happened in books. Jenna's eyes widened. My throat locked. "I'm leaving Rachel," he added, like an afterthought. "It's time." He sat down. No explanation, no apology. Just, it's time. Like we were wrapping up a dinner party, not a marriage. People stared at me like I might combust, like I was a live wire with a puddle of water nearby. I could feel the heat in my cheeks, not from shame but fury trying to push its way out of my skin. Instead, I smiled. I didn't fake it. It was real. Because I had been waiting for this, planning for it, actually. Ethan didn't know, but the moment he raised that glass was the moment he walked straight into the trap he'd been building for himself for over a year. I leaned over and kissed Jenna on the cheek. "I'm so proud of you, baby. This is still your day." Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. Cream-colored, thick and sealed. I placed it beside Ethan's untouched waffle. He blinked at it. "What is this?" "Something for you to read later," I said, voice steady. "You made your toast. I'm making mine." I stood, addressed the room. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our daughter. I hope you enjoy the rest of your meal. I wish you a beautiful afternoon." I left. No drama, no tears, not yet. Just the click of my heels on tile and the sound of the door hissing shut. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's listening and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We were married 28 years, the kind of marriage people envied from the outside. Pictures in frames, couples game nights, matching Est 1995 mugs. But if you zoomed in, you'd see the cracks. The way he only touched me when others were watching. How he made me feel like any dream I had was a hobby, not a plan. How often I found myself doing damage control for him, for us, for everything. Still, I kept up the illusion for Jenna, for the neighborhood, for whatever I thought love was supposed to look like. And now, standing in the bright July heat outside Magnolia and Oak, I realized I didn't have to pretend anymore.
I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Ethan always underestimated me, always thought I was the kind of woman who'd crumble, who'd cause a scene. He thought humiliation would unravel me, but he didn't realize I had already undone every knot he'd tied around me. I walked across the hot pavement, my heels clicking like a metronome, steady and precise. The air outside smelled like cut grass and heat off asphalt. I let the sun hit my face and took the deepest breath I'd taken in months. The envelope I'd left by his plate, it wasn't just a response, it was a reset button. Inside were copies of the divorce petition, bank records, and a notarized affidavit referencing Section 14 of the prenup he signed 29 years ago, right before my parents gave us the down payment for our first home. That clause, the one he'd once insisted on because I was the one with the assets, had become the sword he'd fall on, because it included a fidelity clause. And Ethan, he hadn't just cheated, he'd invested in cheating. Monthly payments to someone named S. Harper, gift receipts, wire transfers to a joint account that wasn't mine. I knew it all, had known it for months. What he thought was a clean break was actually a public suicide note for his credibility. Halfway to the parking lot, I heard the restaurant doors slam open behind me. "Rachel!" His voice, panicked, pinched, not the same voice that had announced his freedom 3 minutes earlier. "What the hell is this? You served me divorce papers today?" I didn't stop walking. I just smiled and got in the car. It wasn't until I turned the ignition that my hands started to tremble a little. Not from fear, from adrenaline. The kind that buzzes in your ears and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I gripped the wheel tighter, closed my eyes, and let the engine purr beneath me. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, and still, it hit different when it was real. I drove straight home, our house in the Oakwood Historic District, the one with the wraparound porch and blue hydrangeas out front. The same house Ethan had promised to someone special in a text I wasn't supposed to see. The blinds were still open, the mailbox still full of congratulatory cards for Jenna, the illusion still standing. Inside, it was quiet, almost too quiet. I slipped off my heels, padded through the kitchen, past the counter where we used to have coffee every morning. I went upstairs. His suitcase was exactly where I expected it to be, tucked behind the winter coats, neatly zipped. I laughed under my breath, always so careful with clothes, so careless with people. I pulled it out, placed it in the hallway. My phone buzzed. 1 call from Jenna, 5 texts from friends, 1 missed call from Ethan's sister Maggie. I replied to Jenna first. "I'm okay. You were amazing today. We'll talk tonight. This isn't yours to carry." Then I turned my phone over and left it on the dresser. No more screens, no more distractions. I needed to feel this moment, let it settle. Because this was it, the part where you stop surviving and start shedding skin. I poured a glass of water, sat at the edge of my bed, and stared out the window. I could hear cicadas buzzing like static electricity in the trees. Somewhere downtown, Ethan was probably pacing, probably dialing every lawyer he could think of, probably wondering how I'd flipped the script before he even had a chance to pitch it. He didn't know yet that I was the one who'd been writing the story all along. I sat there for a long time. The sun shifted through the curtains, dragging slants of light across the hardwood floor like silent clock hands. It was a familiar room, same linen drapes, same framed photo of the 3 of us at Myrtle Beach, Jenna maybe 10, Ethan sunburned, me holding a paper cup of wine and laughing like someone who hadn't yet learned to count red flags. The Rachel in that photo would have forgiven him, again, would have told herself it was just a phase, that he didn't mean to lie, that things would get better once the next business finally took off, once Jenna was older, once life settled. But that Rachel had died slowly over years of quiet betrayals.
I think it started with the restaurant he opened. That was the first time he asked me to pull from my 401k. He said it was a calculated risk. He used phrases like scaling up and local gold mine. I used spreadsheets and sleepless nights, trying to make up for the gap it left in our savings. I watched him get excited, really excited, about opening a wood-fired pizzeria with 2 college buddies. I remember thinking he looked younger when he was dreaming, like the best version of himself was always slightly out of reach. And I kept investing in him the way you invest in a fixer-upper house, endlessly, exhaustingly, with hope. The restaurant failed in 13 months. Then came the furniture-making phase, handcrafted cabinets, artisanal cutting boards. I still have 2 in the garage, beautiful things, but the follow-through was never there. He got bored, said the margins were too thin. Meanwhile, I was working full-time at Carewell Health and handling everything else, Jenna's school fees, groceries, mortgage payments. We had merged our lives, but only I had kept merging the consequences. Still, I told myself, just wait until she graduates. Like I'd been holding my breath for 22 years. But Ethan didn't wait. The change in him started small. He'd come home smelling like a different brand of cologne. He was suddenly busy on weekends. He started calling me Ratch again, like a man trying to pretend everything was fine. And I was stupid, or scared, or maybe just too damn tired, tried to believe him, until the transfers started. Tiny ones at first, $500 here, $800 there, labeled things like consulting fees or reimbursed expenses. I manage finances for a living. I notice patterns. I knew what he was doing before I even knew who he was doing it for. But I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I waited. I logged. I documented. I became methodical. It wasn't revenge. It was preservation. Like packing a go bag before the storm hits. The smile I wore at brunch wasn't for show. It was real, because I knew. I knew he thought I'd beg or cry or plead for an explanation. But I had already peeled back every layer of denial and found the truth. I'd been playing the supporting role in a life I co-authored. And now, I was finally ready to write solo. Downstairs, I could hear the clock ticking, slow, steady, metronomic. The same clock my parents gave us for our anniversary. It struck me then. They'd once called Ethan steady, but they didn't know what I knew now. He wasn't the constant.
The real unraveling started with the receipt from Nordstrom. It wasn't the price that bothered me, it was the timing. 2 days after our conversation about tightening the budget, he'd lectured me about preparing for retirement, said we were going to cut back, skip the anniversary trip, maybe even rent out the guest room. Then I found a $1,200 charge for a gold necklace. When I asked him about it, he blinked. It was for a client gift, he said. A client. He was between clients at the time. That night, while he was in the shower, I checked our joint bank account again. The transfers were small, irregular, but there was a pattern. A new account I didn't recognize, ending in 6743, started appearing once a month like clockwork. I didn't say anything. Instead, I logged in again later from my work laptop, took screenshots. I started a folder labeled, "For Now." It got worse when I found the iPad. He hadn't used it in years. It was sitting in the kitchen drawer underneath old birthday candles and expired coupons, but it was still connected to his iCloud. I opened it, fingers cold. The screen lit up. That's when I saw it. The messages.
I wasn't looking for them. I wasn't snooping, I swear. They were just there, floating across the screen like ghosts mid-conversation. Ethan, we'll do it after the brunch. She won't make a scene in public. Sloan, promise? Ethan, she has no idea. Rachel still thinks I'm broke. My throat closed. I wanted to throw the iPad across the room. I didn't. I read more. They were talking about me like I was some background character in their movie. He told her I was clueless, that I'd roll over, maybe cry, but eventually let him go quietly. Sloan Harper, realtor, younger. Not young, just enough. The kind of woman who wears blazers over silk camisoles and calls margaritas margs. I Googled her. I even recognized her face. She had shown us a house once, smiled at me, complimented my shoes. I sat on the couch holding that iPad like it was radioactive. My hands were shaking again, but not from sadness this time, from focus. This wasn't just cheating, this was theft. He had been moving money behind my back, lying to me, and planning to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. I started collecting screenshots of messages, bank transfer logs, call records, even photos of receipts tucked into the glove box of his car. I stopped sleeping through the night. I was living on muscle memory and iced coffee. Jenna thought I was just stressed from work. Then one afternoon, while printing evidence at the UPS store, a woman behind me tapped my shoulder and said, "That your husband?" She pointed to a photo I'd printed. Ethan and Sloan at a wine bar. Hands too close. She said, "I showed them a property in Durham last week. Thought he looked familiar." I thanked her and went to my car and just sat there. No tears, no screaming, just silence. It was the kind of silence that fills your whole body, where everything inside you slows down and gets sharp. I realized I had reached a turning point. This wasn't going to be a confrontation. This wasn't going to be a scream fest in the kitchen. This was going to be a strategy. And I was going to win.
I drove to Maggie's that night. I didn't call first. I just showed up with a duffel bag and a stack of manila folders clutched to my chest like a life vest. She opened the door and took one look at me before stepping aside. "Come in," she said. No questions, no pleasantries, just that look, half worry, half knowing. Her house in Durham was small, cozy. It smelled like lemon balm and old books. She wore a faded Carolina Panthers hoodie and no makeup, but she always carried this quiet elegance, like a woman who long ago learned how to be whole on her own. I dropped the bag by her couch and sat down. "He's cheating," I said. She nodded like she'd already suspected it. "With Sloan?" My stomach turned. "You knew?" She hesitated. "I saw them at the Christmas gala. He said it was a client, but his hand was on her back like he'd paid for the dress." I stared at her, my throat tightening. She didn't want to blow things up without knowing for sure, and I thought maybe he'd do the right thing. "He never even considered it," I said. She reached for my hand. We sat like that for a few minutes, and I felt something in me unclench for the first time in weeks. She poured us 2 glasses of red wine, and we moved to the sunroom. I told her everything: the messages, the bank transfers, the iPad. She listened, quiet and still. Only Maggie could make silence feel like action. "You still have the prenup?" she asked. "In my safety deposit box, and a scanned copy. Does it have a fidelity clause?" "Section 14, I said. Her eyes widened a little. "Then you've already won." I swallowed hard. "He doesn't know that." "Even better," she said. We sat for hours talking through what came next.
Maggie had a friend who used to practice family law. She offered to make an introduction. I told her I already had someone, Philip Dorsey. Calm, competent, and just aggressive enough. Before bed, I showed her the envelope I'd prepared. She read it and let out a slow whistle. "You gonna give him this?" "Not yet," I said. "I want it to land with maximum effect." She laughed, not unkindly, just a sharp little huff of respect. "I didn't know you had this in you." I didn't either. I slept in Maggie's guest room that night. The bed was smaller than ours at home. The comforter smelled like lavender. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I'd felt truly safe. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I heard my phone buzz. It was Jenna. "Mom, I'm coming over tomorrow. Dad's saying crazy stuff. He's telling everyone you ambushed him." Of course he was. I texted her back. "Let's talk. I'll explain everything." The next morning, I made coffee in Maggie's kitchen like it was my own. She handed me a file I hadn't seen before. "What's this?" She smirked. "Property records. He tried to put a rental in his and Sloane's name last month. The lease never finalized. Credit check bounced back because they flagged the income." I stared at it. "How do you have this?" She hugged me. Hard. She was the one person Ethan never saw coming.
He showed up around noon, pounding on Maggie's front door like a man who thought he was still in control. "Rachel," he bellowed, "we need to talk." Maggie peered through the window. He brought her. I joined her at the door. Sure enough, Ethan was pacing on the porch, red-faced and sweating through his button-down. Behind him stood Sloane, tight-lipped, arms folded, wearing expensive sunglasses and that realtor posture that says, "I'm used to getting what I want." Maggie opened the door slowly. "You have 60 seconds, she said. "Don't be ridiculous," Ethan snapped. "I'm not here to fight." "Could have fooled me," she said, and let them in, though her stance was pure security guard. They stepped into the living room like they owned it. Sloane looked around at Maggie's bookshelves, her antique lamp, her cat curled under the piano bench. She didn't belong here. Not in this house, not in this family. "Ethan," started, voice strained, "you need to unfreeze the accounts." I didn't answer. I just gestured for Jenna to sit beside me on the couch. She had arrived 15 minutes earlier and hadn't said a word to her father. "You filed divorce papers without even telling me. You blindsided me in front of everyone." I stayed quiet. "You think that's rational? You think this is mature?" I reached under the coffee table and pulled out a slim folder. Inside was the timeline, dates of transfers, screenshots of texts, receipts. I laid it gently on the table. Sloane leaned forward, curious. Ethan didn't touch it. "You wanted to talk," I said. "Let's." He sputtered. "This is, what, a dossier? This is insane." "It's evidence of financial misconduct and infidelity, violations of the prenup you signed." "That thing's expired," he said with a scoff. "It's not. Section 18 remains in effect through the marriage and any dissolution proceedings. You might want to read it this time." Sloane turned her gaze to him slowly. "You said it wasn't enforceable." He looked away. "Besides," he added, voice rising, "Georgia is a one-party state. That recording is illegal. We're in North Carolina, and it's still one-party consent. And it wasn't your private conversation. You said it in our home to someone who had every right to be there." He paled. Jenna stood, her face hard. "You lied to me," she said. "You hugged me yesterday and told me you were proud, while you were planning to destroy our family during brunch." Ethan stepped toward her. "Jenna, honey, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me exactly," she said, voice shaking now. "You used my graduation as a cover for your exit. You were going to drop a bomb and walk away like a hero." Sloane shifted. "I didn't know he was going to say it there," she said, glancing at me.
"That wasn't the plan." "You had a plan?" Jenna shot back. Maggie stepped in. "I think it's time you both leave." "I need my money," Ethan said, desperation cracking his voice. "I have obligations." "You have your personal account, the one you've been transferring money into all year, the one you never disclosed." Sloane blinked. "Wait, how much is in that?" His silence told her everything. That was the moment their alliance cracked. Sloane took a small step back. Her eyes darted toward the door. "We should go." Ethan reached out for her, but she avoided his hand. "This isn't over," he hissed at me as she pulled him toward the exit. "It never is, until it is."
It was raining when we stepped into the Wake County Courthouse. Light but relentless, like a reminder that this wasn't the end of something, it was the washing away of years of lies. I wore a gray suit, the same one I'd worn to pitch Carewell's budget to the board 2 years ago. Power without arrogance, precision without apology. Ethan showed up 10 minutes late, dragging a wheeled briefcase and looking like someone who hadn't slept in a week. He wore that same too-tight sport coat he always pulled out for serious meetings. It looked more desperate than dignified now. His lawyer was a junior associate from some mid-tier firm. Fresh-faced, out of his depth, flipping through pages he clearly hadn't read until that morning. My attorney, Philip Dorsey, arrived with one folder, a legal pad, and no fear. He gave me a nod and a calm whisper. "This judge has no time for showmanship. We'll be fine." We were called in shortly after 9 a.m. The courtroom was small, just wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and that dry, humming tension you only feel when two people's entire lives are about to be sliced into legal terms. The judge, Honorable Elaine Morton, wore glasses low on her nose and read everything twice before speaking. I liked her immediately. She started with the prenup. This document, dated September 3, 1996, includes a clause under Section 14 detailing asset forfeiture in the event of infidelity, she read, adjusting her glasses. Ethan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we contend the agreement is void due to the duration of the marriage and lack of recent review." Judge Morton didn't blink. Section 18 clearly states the terms remain binding through the duration of the marriage and any resulting legal proceedings. Did your client not read it? He floundered. "I'm maintaining the freeze on all joint accounts pending full discovery," she continued. "Ms. Whitman will retain temporary possession of the primary residence. Mr. Whitman's personal account remains accessible, subject to standard living expense limitations." Ethan stood up. "This is ridiculous." She cut him off with a glare sharp enough to silence a jury. "Mr. Whitman, you may be accustomed to making your own rules, but in this courtroom, you will follow mine. Sit down." He sat. Philip stood crisp and clear. "Your Honor, we'd also like to enter Exhibit C, documented financial transactions and communications indicating a deliberate attempt to conceal assets while simultaneously violating the terms of the marital contract." Judge Morton nodded. "Noted. We'll reconvene in 30 days for full review. Until then, the existing restrictions remain." The gavel cracked like a gunshot. We walked out into the drizzle again, but I felt warm, alive, like I was no longer dragging a dead weight behind me, like I had finally passed through something dark and cold and into the thinnest sliver of light. Ethan caught up to me in the hallway, breathless. "Rachel, please, we don't have to go nuclear." "We're past nuclear," I said. "I made a mistake, but we've got history." "You're right, we do. And you set it on fire." He opened his mouth to respond, but I turned and walked away. One hallway, one decision, no hesitation. Outside, Maggie was waiting with an umbrella and a smile that didn't need words. For once, I didn't feel alone.
2 weeks after the hearing, I got a text from Maggie that just said, "Check your email. You're going to love this." Attached was a screenshot, Sloane's listing on Zillow. The apartment she and Ethan had tried to lease, it was now up for sublet, fully furnished, 1 bedroom, downtown, must transfer lease quickly. According to Maggie's contact in real estate, Sloane had packed up and left the weekend after the hearing, left the apartment, the city, and most importantly, left Ethan. The girl who once smirked at me from across a wine bar now looked ghost-like in the headshot on her updated business page. The confidence? Gone. Her Instagram had gone private. I wasn't proud of checking, but I did. Of course I did. Turns out, Sloane, her real name, had thought Ethan was sitting on a pile of assets, that his business was booming, that the rental was just temporary while they finalized a beachfront purchase in Wilmington. She hadn't known that his business had been coasting on what was essentially my money, or that without access to our joint funds, he had little more than maxed out credit cards, 3 overdue invoices, and a deposit on a car he couldn't afford anymore. Apparently, she found out when he offered to split a Costco rotisserie chicken, and she asked, "What happened to the beach house?" She didn't take it well. Jenna told me later that Sloane had stopped by her apartment unannounced, wanted to clear the air, said she didn't mean for any of this to happen, that Ethan made her promises, said the marriage was dead, that I was cold, distant. Jenna's reply? "Did you believe the guy who lies for a living?" She closed the door in her face. There's a part of me, some ancient maternal instinct maybe, that wanted to feel pity, to imagine Sloane crying in her car, feeling betrayed, realizing she was just a chapter in Ethan's long-running book of disappointments. But I couldn't summon it, not when I remembered her sitting at our table last Christmas, laughing at Ethan's jokes. Not when I remembered her texting him about brunch plans when I was packing Jenna's dorm care package. Not when I remembered the way she looked at me once, like I was the obstacle, not the origin. So no, I didn't feel pity. I felt peace. Because one by one, every illusion Ethan had built was collapsing. The business was insolvent. The girlfriend was gone. His friends were backing away quietly, like people distancing themselves from a house that might cave in. Even the car he'd been test driving, a new BMW 5 Series, was posted for sale on Craigslist by the dealership. "Lease withdrawn," the caption read. That made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was symbolic. Everything in his life was leased. Borrowed time, borrowed money, borrowed confidence. When the real accounting began, he had nothing left. And I was just getting started. My nights were filled with phone calls now, not to banks or lawyers, but to web developers, branding consultants, potential clients. I was building something of my own. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dread waking up in the morning. I was becoming the version of myself he had spent years pretending didn't exist. And she was powerful.
My office was small, but it was mine. A one-room space above a boutique bakery in downtown Raleigh. Exposed brick, creaky wood floors, secondhand furniture that I had chosen piece by piece. I painted the walls a soft sage green, framed a few of my favorite quotes, and hung a corkboard with the word "Build" pinned in the center. Caldwell Financial Resilience. That's what I called it. My maiden name, reclaimed like the rest of my life. It started quietly. 2 clients, both women in their 50s, both navigating divorces that felt eerily similar to mine. They weren't helpless, they were just overwhelmed, overloaded by paperwork, guilt, shame, unsure where to begin. and I knew exactly where to start. Every spreadsheet I created for them, every budget I restructured, every hidden account I uncovered, it felt like I was rewinding my own pain and turning it into a map, a survival guide. Word spread faster than I expected. Divorce attorneys started referring their clients to me. Therapists emailed asking if I'd consider a workshop series. One even said, "Rachel, what you're doing, it's more than financial literacy. It's therapy with numbers." Jenna came by one weekend with coffee and a bag of lemon scones. She walked around slowly, taking it all in. She said, "You built this from the ashes," she said, fingers brushing the corner of my business license framed on the wall. "I built it from the truth," I replied. She sat on the couch, her eyes wet. She said, "I'm proud of you. I mean, insanely proud." I held her hand. I said, "You taught me how to fight." She said, "No, you just finally remembered how." I found myself again in the quiet between client calls, in the way I arranged paper clips, in the playlist I made for my commute. I even wore lipstick again, not for anyone else, just to remember what it felt like to take up space. I still had hard days, days when the silence of the house pressed against my ears like static, when a half-empty closet or the click of an old voicemail made my chest tighten. But those days were fewer now, and they no longer felt like failures, just echoes. Ethan, as I'd heard through the grapevine, was now renting a one-bedroom in Apex. His business was unraveling without me keeping the books. The renovations were behind, invoices unpaid. Mutual friends stopped inviting him to dinners. Turns out it's harder to toast a man when you know what he did to get free. I wasn't bitter. Bitterness is a wound that pretends to be armor. What I felt was distance. Like I had crossed over into a new life, and that version of him, of me, was fading behind me like headlights in fog. One night, I stayed late at the office finishing quarterly filings for a client. When I finally walked outside, the streetlights cast long shadows on the brick alley. The air was crisp, alive. I looked up at the stars and thought, he lost the life I built, but I kept the part of me that knew how to rebuild. And that was everything.
It was raining again the morning of what would have been our 29th wedding anniversary. A soft, steady rain that painted the window panes in streaks of silver, more gentle than sorrow. I didn't cry. I made coffee, added cinnamon like I used to only on special days, and curled up on the window bench with a throw blanket and a legal pad filled with client notes. I was reviewing financials for a woman named Teresa, mid-40s, blindsided by a sudden divorce from her high school sweetheart. As I ran through her savings and listed ideas to protect her pension, I found myself smiling because I knew she'd be okay. Not because I was fixing it for her, but because I was showing her how to fix it for herself. And that was the thing Ethan never understood. Real power isn't in holding someone up. It's in showing them they can stand on their own. My phone buzzed just after noon. It was Ethan. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the answer button. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail later. "Rachel, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it's our anniversary, or was. I've been thinking a lot about everything. You were right. About all of it. I hope you're okay. I hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't call him back. I didn't need to. I already had what I was looking for. Jenna visited later that week. She brought Thai food and wine and curled up next to me on the couch, just like she used to when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. We talked about her new job, about the guy she'd been seeing, about how weird it still felt to say, "My mom's divorced," like it was a finished sentence. "It's not an ending," I told her. "It's just a better chapter." She smiled. "You know what's funny? Dad always said you were the glue that held things together. I think he thought it was a compliment." It wasn't. I wasn't glue. I was scaffolding. Which means I was only supposed to hold it all up while it was being built. But it turns out I didn't have to hold him up forever. She nodded slowly. "You look happier." "I am." That night I walked through the house, barefoot, light slow. I passed old photos, old furniture, old echoes of what used to be, but nothing haunted me anymore. In the kitchen drawer, where I once kept receipts of betrayal, I now kept business cards, referral notes, sticky tabs of encouragement from clients who called me a lifeline. I changed the locks. The house was fully mine now. So was my name, Rachel Caldwell. It rang like freedom. I thought the collapse of my marriage would break me, but in truth, it cleared the wreckage so I could finally see what I'd buried: my strength, my instincts, my dreams. In reclaiming my finances, I reclaimed my voice. What started as a plan for revenge became a blueprint for rebirth. I built something Ethan couldn't destroy, something entirely mine: a business, a new identity, a life that doesn't ask permission. Have you ever walked away from something that once defined you and realized you were more yourself than ever before? If you found your power after loss, tell me in the comments. Your story matters. It always has. If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more stories that honor pain, resilience, and reinvention. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Sometimes the life we mourn is the one that made us invisible. Let it go. Rebuild in your own name.